We are live. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Self-Help Bookshelf and the High Leverage Actions podcast, where we bring conversation to you that helps you create small changes for a significant impact in your personal growth.
Did you like the sign language I just did then?
That was brilliant. And I didn't fluff up the intro this week. I'm feeling mostly better. I just saying to Rory, about 95% better now. Just last little bit to go. But this has been a tough one to get through. And, we were just saying in the background, motivation and inspiration at times like that when you're not well can both be challenged. And it's getting back on track sometimes. So sometimes it's little things like, oh, I really fancy something to eat, but you can't be bothered to get up. And then it's down to the bigger challenges in life where we know we've got deadlines and goals to meet. And on the one hand, it's one thing to feel inspired to do something, but then we can sit here with that inspiration as much as we like. But unless we are then motivated to follow through with actions and actually create that goal, we've talked about manifesting and goal setting in the past. So unless we actually have that motivation to follow that through, we could sit here inspired for the rest of our lives and just keep wishing. So anyway, welcome back, Rory. I'm Kay Reeve, emotional awareness expert, focus on the emotions. And I really, really believe in bringing awareness to the foreground of this. Because again, we could sit here for years thinking we know what we're doing. And it's the littlest things sometimes that we've not been aware of in ourselves that can make a really significant difference in how we process all of this personal development information. So over to you, Rory.
Thanks, Kay. Yeah. I'm Rory
Who
Lemon.
are you? Who you are?
Rory Lemon. I go by Rory Lemon Aid, AID, to help online. I'm online with that name, and I'm here to help neurodiverse creatives step into their health and their wealth and their passions and their purposes into their passion projects, so that they actually get out that procrastination, which is what we're going to be talking about today is so important, because procrastination in what defining that is so important, in fact, because if we don't define it, we end up just doing it. We'll refine the procrastination in another way, but yeah, getting out of that and into flow. And I can't wait to discuss this topic.
Wow.
Yeah, so
Yes, good one.
it's really interesting, and I'm pretty sure that all of our words that we associate and we learn and associate with those meanings can be very different, but sometimes we can mean the same thing but have a different associate. We've had this before with a different conversation, and
Yeah,
what you're describing around inspiration and motivation are actually the complete opposite of what of how I see it.
really? Wow. Okay.
Which
Shall
is
I start with how I see them?
yes, go for it.
Okay, right. Well, I'm going to very briefly bring up my book, Brain Unchained, because on the back I have this diagram of the emotional cycle, human emotional cycle. And we have happiness, which is what we're all aiming for. Every human being in the planet wants happiness. We're just driven to it. It's in our DNA. We don't have to make a choice. We want it. Then we've got what I call sadness, anger, and depression. Now, these split up a little bit. So if you imagine a little line through the middle here, sad and anger are further down. But above that, when we rise up from this, so from sadness, for example, we're coming up through thoughtfulness, reflection, contemplation, etc., before we reach happiness. Whereas on the other side, we come up through action, motivation, passion, and it's all the action over here versus reflection and thoughtfulness. So it's like air versus fire if we're looking at the elements almost. And for me, inspiration is about what we think about doing. If we are inspired to do something, the first part of it is the thought process, and that all comes over here. But actually taking that thought process into action for me is the motivation. When we're motivated and we say we're on fire, we're going for it, to me, the action is all over here and it's the positive in the red. And when you put the two together, that's when change really happens. And that's not to say I'm 100% right, but that's my view on it
Yeah,
against the emotional psychodiagram.
totally get it. And actually it's not to do with when I say opposite, what I mean is that what your association with those words are, we're probably talking about the same thing, but my association is kind of almost it's knowing the
Go
neuroscience,
for it.
it's knowing the neuroscience behind it as well. So um in terms of the chemicals and stuff going on. And it is there's similarities and there's also differences. What we learn from discipline to actually make something happen and do it something consistently so that we get something actually done takes discipline regardless of how we feel.
Mm.
Um, and so the neurochemicals of motivation are things like dopamine and serotonin. So dopamine is what we expect we'll get when we get excited about creating something, and serotonin is what happens when we do it and actually have the reward. So dopamine promises us the reward for doing something, which is
Yeah.
motivational. And it takes the motive, the action.
Yes.
Nothing will happen without the action to actually make something happen. Um, but as I say, like I think I've mentioned it before, if you're like aiming for getting better at firing an arrow at a target to success is hitting that target, and it's uh, wobbly, 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 getting better and better and better. But I could be really stressed and I could be getting more and more unhealthy firing that arrow, just going, I've got to get it done, I've got to get it done, I've got to get it done.
Yeah.
And so that could be either motivation from a negative of it not being healthy for us to be motivated in that way,
Mm.
without the self-care and the rest part um, along the
Yeah.
way. Um, and the other thing is that obviously, yeah, I can be like wanting to be happy whilst doing it and only doing it when I feel motivated or happy, which is fleeting.
Yeah.
And so motivation is completely fleeting and based on the neurochemicals in the brain and also um how we will react and respond to whatever our energy's like or our day. So, so when we get committed to something and discipline, we'll get up at the same time or do that thing every single day, whether or not we like it. So so for instance, a mother who's looking after a child and they can't do anything for themselves, and you've committed to being a mother. You're not going to just
Yeah.
not do the mother thing. So there's a commitment there. It's psychologically. So no matter how you feel, you may not feel motivated to get up and do that thing, but but the commitment is and the discipline is being decided, and that to me is takes really getting really defined on what's inspirational. And so
Mm.
and again we've got slightly different attachments to that word, but the way I see inspiration is what Wayne Dyer explains it as it comes from the word in spirit. To be in spirit is to be
Mm.
motivated beyond self needs and to know that it's affecting a greater good, or it's part of a bigger picture, or it's connected to um so to get clear on why we're doing something beforehand, like for instance that project, that writing that book. Let's talk about writing a book. So
Oh.
um but if I want to write a book, if I'm not inspired enough to write the book as a reason why, it's a bigger picture why that it's going to help me to express myself mentally and physically. It's going to be a good promotional and credibility tool, and it's also going to inspire others through that message. There's three different reasons why it creates inspiration, and it doesn't matter how much motivate if it doesn't matter whether I feel motivated or not. If I've set a date to get it done by, and someone like Kay, um, holds me to the fire, to get it done by a certain date, and I've committed to it. It doesn't matter whether I felt motivated or not. There's been points when I was writing this, and there's points where, and luckily I've practiced it. If we haven't practiced hitting that struggle phase of getting into the flow of something, we'll automatically think it's difficult, hard, and we'll want to go and do something easier and pleasure seek because it reminds us of all the stuff we have not done in the past before in our lives. It makes us feel like, oh, I can't do this because I haven't got this thing done yet, and I'm lacking in it. So there's this, the creative flow cycle is that there's a struggle phase, and it takes what could be declared motivation, but not actual physical motivation. It takes something, it takes inspiration as well to see through. And there's been loads of times when was doing stuff on the computer to make that happen, and I would get overloaded. But I'd learnt that that's okay to just step away, and I potentially just walk around the chair, and because I was in, I've connected to my inspiration and connected to the no, I just gonna come back straight to the desk again. That one little reset without just going
Yeah.
away and leaving it completely, and I was able to then just relax and do the next one little step. So yeah,
Mm.
they're both important, and like you say, they're both like one. They're both important. One can't exist without the other, and they both get to be charged up. And so yeah, I'm just wondering when you said about motivation being the thing that has to be there, that's potentially the what I'm seeing as inspiration, and vice versa. That's what I'm curious about what you get from this and where you
Oh,
want to go.
yeah, no, that's great, Rory. And no, you spot on. And even the things you're saying, and you're talking about, again, there's a lot there for me to try and catch up on and process. There's the bit where you were saying about trying to do something even when there's a deadline or a goal, and it might not feel like that motivation, but in a way, that goal is providing that motivation, even if there's less excitement about it. So I think there's a thing. We can feel motivated to do something, whether it's excitement or pressure. For example, you're sitting on the beach and you're just sitting there drinking your cool lemonade, and
Water.
and it's a nice sunny day, and it's, you're overheated and you're just like got nothing to do for the day. You're not motivated to get up and do anything. But if you see a tsunami coming up towards the beach, you're definitely going to be motivated to run, but not because there's any excitement, but because there's a pressure to stay safe. So I think there is a form of motivation that is there as a survival form, and that is the fight flight. And some things we fight for, and some things we flight from, and some things we just go into freeze. But I think, for me, I think there is this, when I'm talking, coming back to this, when we're talking about the action, there's negative action, I suppose, and I hadn't really thought about this until today, but this brings it out for me, is how well I know this cycle is. I can then think, okay, so actually there are ways to be motivated to take action, even though it's for what's perceived a slightly negative reason, whether it is standing up for ourselves and putting boundaries up, whether it is running from something, or in a way that is the flight side. So motivation, I suppose, can work over here running away. But most people associate motivation with positive action. And I think that's the one really most people would want to know about, is how to get motivated. So how to feel like, okay, I don't seem to have any reason to do this, even though I need it to be done. And that's where that deadline can almost act like that, danger coming, I need to move. But it can act like an exciting deadline, or it can be one that says, do you know what, I don't want to do this job, but I need to do it. If I set a deadline and stick to it, it pushes through. And I think the thing is also to be careful about how we balance mixing motivation with deadlines versus rewards. And like you said, there's also that need for the reward and the dopamine. And if we're constantly doing stress deadlines, that's where a lot of people burn out, and especially at work, when you're constantly picking off one deadline after another on this massive to-do list of or everybody's throwing at you. And that was definitely the challenge I had at work. When I finally had somebody else help me calculate my task list for the day, week, month, and year, what my tasks actually added up to in time versus the time that I was available to do them on my work schedule. And my work list came to 193% of my availability. Like, no wonder I was getting burnt out, constantly just picking off the deadlines. And I felt like I was drowning in my workload. And that explained a lot. So my managers were then able to help me work that load back down and delegate some stuff out and close some other projects off and so on. So, but then there's also, like you say, that motivation of, I don't know, wanting to go on a road trip or a holiday, or to actually get up and make a cake or something, or to go out for a walk. And it's a different kind of motivation. And I think we do need to balance a bit of both, because we have all the exciting ones and no other challenging ones, then life that can become quite routine in itself, and routine loses excitement. So having deadlines plus exciting motivation, I think, is amazing to have that good balance of both. But the inspiration is for me, the inspiration is where we see things happening or we have ideas and go, oh, I'd like to do that. And for me, inspiration, there might be other negative connotations, but to me, the inspiration is the bit that makes me think, oh, I would really like to have a go at that, whether it's trying a new craft, or a new hobby, whether I am inspired to go and visit somewhere or go and talk to somebody different and start a new podcast about high leverage actions. This to me is all the inspiration. And every week we have a conversation. It's inspiring us to think of new things and connect with new people. But again, our views are there. And although everybody takes us, I had a really good conversation today in one of the networks about AI. And there was lots of different views about AI, whether it's helpful or not. But again, there's a lot of inspiration can come out of listening to all of it. But these conversations to me are inspiring. So I'm going to let you carry on with that, Rory. What do you take back from that?
Yeah, yeah. It's yeah, I like what you're sharing about uh just the sense of that it's almost like it spreads. It's important to notice what about excitement, but not be addicted to the excitement, because then we can't hold that level all the time. We're meant to rise in the daytime and then calm down at night and things like that. And if we can get into cyclical processes, um, that's I find useful. Whether it's a really strict daily routine that people find useful, or a project, what I find is a project routine helps me. So I set a deadline for a particular thing and just spend time each day doing it until it's done. Whereas some people just need that regular consistency of doing the same thing at the same time every single day. So it really does personality and chronotype being what time of day you naturally have the most energy in the day to be in flow for creating things. That's tweaking it to the more neuroscience again part of it, of really being able to assess that and make that happen.
Mm.
And finally, the things that I would say that come up for me is yes, again, um, there's uh
While you're thinking of that, we've actually done an episode on routine versus variety and comfort zones, and they're all relevant, and a few previous episodes. But yeah.
yeah. Um, just really coming back to that sense of vision is so important for the inspiration, and how to channel that motivation by almost expecting it to not be there. Uh, uh, and it just takes a little bit of noticing. So it's reformatting and relearning how to sense how we're feeling, and then still put that to the side and go, can I take a small action right now? And that what I call motivation is to take a movement, and it might be that it's not to do with the actual thing you want to get done. It's just get a bit of energy up and change the mood, and so or mood motivation. So channeling that and knowing that it can be relearnt. Whatever pattern that we're going through, it's so important to almost expect that motivation is very fleeting. It's part of neurochemicals, and it's all based on, so many things like blood sugars go down, we won't have the motivation. Whereas it is possible to realign it and go, okay, well, what do I need? Oh, I just do this little bit and then come back to this and then get back on it again, and all that stuff. And the other piece that comes up for me is imagination is so important. So to wake up in the morning and actually routinely for me to not just jump straight into whatever it is, even if I'm feeling motivated, to actually not even respond to that motivation straight away and actually practice the discipline of getting into imaginative state of how I'm gonna show up that day before just starting to follow blind urges, whether it's pleasure and excitement or the lack of feeling motivated, because they're both emotional things are useful to gauge and be aware of, but also they're not there to rule us because um, we'll just blindly do random crazy things all the time. Otherwise,
Yep.
so so um, so yeah, and of course, those that struggle with ADHD and things like that,
Oh,
or
that was going to be my next point. Yeah.
knowingly or unknowingly, the dopamine is massively difficult to control the dopamine creation. So there's different types. There's short-term energy relieving behaviors that create a sense of dopamine in the system, which is very short-lived and then dies again immediately. And then there's this discipline and choosing something that has reward later through the challenge, and getting into a repetitive pattern of that is, and if it takes just doing smaller versions of that rather than like I'm going to write a book and then just falling by the wayside, but just what could it be to write a page of something every day for 3 weeks and see what happens, and notice when it's wants to go, okay, well, I did it for 3 days, but I'm not feeling motivated, um or whatever it is. So how to turn that, how to turn that space of going through the challenge without the dopamine, and actually, or even the last piece is the dopamine detox, which actually resets it. So if we're used to having a lot and doing things that give us this certain amount, we're going to get used to it. We're going to get used to it, going to get used to it, and then it will crash. So it's actually useful every now and again, and I find myself feeling like, why am I doing this to myself? But it's because I've got used to challenging myself in a way in which means that I won't just do something over and over and over again, because I'll want more and more and more of it, and it becomes um, too much. So I actually go through cycles again of building up strength in something, and then I actually abstain from it, and my subconscious is going, "What are you doing? I want more of that," and I'm like, "No, that's enough for now," and just calm it right down, so that I become sensitive to it again. So, for instance. And a good example of that would be is if I don't drink squash or anything. I don't ever have any sugar, because I again it can just be a spiral. But if I was to have something in the water and I just had the same, because of my ADHD tendencies, I would get used to that level, and then I would want to add a little bit more to feel the difference, because the difference is boring. It becomes boring very quickly.
Yeah.
And so So it's actually about, for me, dropping back down to like just drinking water for a day and not having any caffeine or coffee or things. And I'll just have less food and less things and calm it all back down. And so just the water in itself resets the flavor palette, and then only need a bit less. I need less flavor to be able to have more stimulus again. So it's about noticing what stimulus is going to be happening, and whether it's getting overdone or not, in order to yeah, calm that down and have sort of cyclical spikes of detoxing from whatever it is that keeps building and building and building.
Hmm. No, that's good. So actually, there's this connection between, in a sense, willpower, because I find it very difficult to have the willpower to drink just water for even a day, let alone do it repeatedly. I'm always been very sugar driven. That is definitely one I'm challenged with. Um, but yeah, when you're talking about doing things to create the motivation, by doing them anyway, I get that. And there is an element there of doing it can build that up. But I also think there can be an element of doing it without the inspiration, without the motivation. Doing it anyway can sometimes feel very draining in return. Like when you were talking about being a parent, and there's those days when you're like 2 or 3 years into parenting and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm absolutely drained from doing this. And you realize you still got another 15 years to go. And they're constantly back chatting and arguing and you're like, I don't know if I can do this for another 15 years. And you can't change the fact that you've got children and get rid of them. I mean, few people do. But what we can do is, like you say, shift the mindset. And that to me is, like you talked about earlier on as well, dedication. I can't think of the other word you said now, commitment. So some things, even without the inspiration and the motivation, is commitment. To me, that's the doing it anyway, is finding commitment. But when and yes, with all the neurodiversity and the ADHD, especially with the ADHD, that dopamine level is challenged. And it is classed as a dopamine deficit, isn't it, with the ADHD? And it reacts differently, especially the prefrontal cortex. And I always imagine this is something I saw that made it clear for me. If I turn sideways, this bit here, the back of the head, remembers. I'm not neurologically trained like you, so this is my very pragmatic way of saying it. The back of your head remembers, oh, I remember what worked last time, and the middle bit says that this bit here says, okay, let's go and do that then. Right? I remember how we do it, so I remember what we're going to do. I remember how to do it. And then the prefrontal cortex says, right, let's get on and do it then. So this is the bit here with all the motivation, forward action, motivation, past memories. And if you remember it like a timeline, and when the prefrontal cortex is deficient in the dopamine, no matter how much you think, oh, I remember how much fun that was, and I remember how to do it, if you haven't got that dopamine in there already to a degree that helps you get up and do it, you'll just sit there and procrastinate forever. And I've been there with that, with the depression, and it's very difficult to push past that. And that to me was where I then had to step back to inspiration, because inspiration can then spark motivation as well. And so if you're finding you're one of these people that, as much as Rory does all of this, and I know it works because I do it, but not to the level Rory does, I'm still learning to push through those days where there is no motivation. And I'm still learning to just do it anyway, because I'm still challenged a bit by that motivation level. But when I can put the inspiration in, then I'm more likely to do something. And when I was in a state of depression a few years back, after some very challenging times and a lot of health issues, I found myself inspired through mindfulness. And when you were talking about the flow state earlier, like doing something at a computer and just walking away goes from the red action into the blue thinking just by walking away. And it's enough to then pick up some inspiration and come back and take action and motivation again. And when we can use that process through mindfulness, and that's what that is being mindful even for a few seconds, In fact, the day I sat being mindful in my car for a moment, waiting for my son to decide what to do, and he was suicidal. And it was that moment where he was going, just give me a minute. And I sat mindfully for a minute, that I came up with the best light bulb moment of my life, which is why I created the emotional cycle diagram in the first place. But this book, Darker Than Dark, is the one that I wrote after coming through depression, because in that darkest of days, when I actually found myself in my rock bottom place, and even though I was sitting in a bright sunlit room, in my mind, I was staring into this chasm of darkness. And it really was darker than dark. And I could just see all these vision of people walking past, and I knew they weren't coming back. But I knew I couldn't follow either. And I had to turn around and come back, because I knew I had a message to share. And that was my inspiration that day. But I wasn't motivated at that point to do anything with it. But there was an inspiration that got me to turn around and come out of that dark space. And then that inspired me to write the poem, which I did. And then it took the motivation to sit and write it. But then it was probably about 3 to 6 months before I then created the book, because again, I lacked the motivation. But I sat there for months with the inspiration to put it into the book before I could find the motivation to actually create the book. And that, to me, was where the inspiration and motivation had to come together. And for people in that really dark place, using that mindfulness, even to look for something like color or shapes or textures, or listen for sounds and smells and all of that. And I think we've done one on mindfulness earlier as well anyway, another episode of this. But to me, all of that is really important as well, even when you're in that deep, dark place with depression, to use that inspiration and motivation in even the smallest increments to move forward, no matter how slow it is. Whereas on the other hand, you could be like us and we go, right, we're going to write a book and it's going to be published in 90 days. Well, actually, mine was, do you know what? Mine, this one, when I did this one, I rang up the UK's leading motivational coach. And I rang him in the November and said, I want my book out by spring. Can you help me? And because I was something I couldn't quite structure right. Now, I learned that if you want to do something in a few months, don't ring a motivational expert, because my book was published within 28 days. Ringing him. But that's the difference. Sometimes it's also having support from somebody else can make a huge difference as well. And sometimes I think the biggest thing with inspiration and motivation why we don't take actions is not having someone for accountability, not having someone to talk to, not having someone to just share the successes with, and just even speaking to on the phone occasionally saying, yeah, I've achieved this week and I've achieved that week. And a lot of people will say to us at times, well, why do you need all that validation? Well, why shouldn't we need it? There's a reason that it exists, and we collaborate and we talk and share and story tell, and it all helps reward, and we celebrate together as we would have do as families around the campfire. And for me, that is all relevant all the way through, no matter how small or how big the task is. Yeah, there we go.
Amazing. Love it.
I got inspired there, didn't I?
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love it. And also just to remind, it's that thing of sometimes, well, I know that I would not be where I am being able to create what I want and not just work for other people or be upset, frustrated with systems and stuff, creating my own system and bringing it to the world, because without mentorship, without coaching, without that sense, because what it does essentially is hold someone accountable to change their habits, because changing a habit on our own either takes an ultimatum of complete, if I don't do this right now, something terrible is going to happen. And that's what some people will change that habit with. But generally, if you want to not wait, or if I don't want to wait, and I've not, even that was, I couldn't wait any longer, but it was because I wanted to change multiple aspects and massive long-term change, not just I want to stop doing this thing and stop doing that thing. Luckily, I in my life I've been passionate about habits, and I out off my own back chose to cut out sugar at 24 for as long as I could. And that's actually quite rare, I think, to find someone that actually
Mm.
motivates themselves, other than maybe that I went through a period of psychosis in my early 20s. So that would have shook again. That just got to that point where I was shaken up so much. I'm like, okay, but it wasn't that. It wasn't. I went through that, and it was that I went through that and got better through natural means. Was like we don't have to wait for something terrible to happen. We don't have to rely on a medical system as such. Yes, it's useful for certain things, but they just didn't really they don't really understand that long-term habit change stuff. And so that's where the coaching is so valuable. And yeah, I wouldn't be able to be doing what I'm doing right now without that,
Yeah.
without fleeting or incremental coaching, but also the long-term mentors I have in my life. And the the there was one other thing I was going to say. Oh, that's it. You mentioned mindfulness. The last thing I'll say on this, because yeah, it'd be good to like, um, I feel like this, well, for me, it's the last thing that I'll say, which is what you mentioned about mindfulness is so important because what it actually does in those moments, a prolonged mindfulness, not just doing it just to stay mindful and reflect for a moment, but prolonged, even, and I'm taking it takes effort and concentration to even prolong it for 2 minutes in most cases, unless it really, people are well practiced. So just in that 2 minutes, that switches down the brain into safety mode, which accesses this back shelf of actually knowing what to do properly, what's actually truly important to do, not just the I should be doing this, should be doing that emotional middle center.
Yeah.
And so mindfulness accesses that, and it calms things down and makes it looks it can re access the picture and the feeling part of the brain that knows where things are and what to do, not from a rushy point of view. So uh,
Mm.
it's mindfulness creates a thing called multi-perspectival knowing, and that is that it creates perspective. It separates ourselves from our thoughts, it separates ourselves from our personality, and it allows us to, even if we're not just pretending to or zooming up and seeing our lives from a higher perspective or a different perspective in that moment, it's just changing perspective and not being caught up in that one perspective only is massive. And that's where practicing that, reflecting on it, we get realizations from different perspectives, which can help us. And the final piece on that is the cards. Is what I put together for myself. Giving up drinking and changing perspective is so important. So I can pull a card and I'm gonna feel the joy right now. I'm gonna feel the joy. So it's just ways to flip that change, flip that purpose in that moment
Inspirational.
to get inspirational, to then get motivational. Yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Inspirational. Changing those thoughts. That's brilliant. No, thank you, Roy. It's incredible. What was that?
Multi-perspectival knowing. So I mean,
Multi-perspective on it.
multi-perspective, but multi-perspectival is
Yeah.
multi-perspectival
Yeah.
is to be able to look at things from different angles and
Mm.
and go, okay, well, if that light bulb went, I could get a chair and change the light bulb and replace it and then see if that worked. Or I could just check to see if it is working. Or I could go down to the fuse box and change the fuse. So there's multiple ways in which that is needs changing or doing something with. Um,
Or you
and
could just wait for the main grid to turn the power back on after the thunderstorm.
Exactly. It depends on what's going on, but
Yeah.
it's not just the light bulb. So that's the point. And I'm sure there's a joke in there somewhere. How many mindful experts does it take to change a light bulb?
Oh dear. Oh, good one. Yeah, we'll have to think that one up. But no, that's fantastic, Rory. And some such great points there tonight. And I really hope that does inspire other people to look
Motivate
at
them.
where their inspiration comes from. And when you were talking about coaching, this for me is the last bit I want to bring in as well on the back of that is coaching is, well, yes, we're here, reach out to us. We both have different coaching programs. We cover different areas. For me, it is about understanding those core emotions. And especially if you're a coach, therapist, mentor, trainer, supporting other people where they are visual learners and find it difficult to connect with those emotions. That's where I have that learning strategy. Whereas Rory deals with a lot of very different stuff on the, like you said, on the neurodivergent spectrums and dealing with that creative flow and helping people through that motivational routines and habits. And that's great. But when we're talking about coaching, we know it's costly for a lot of people to reach out to people like us. We can't do this for free all the time as much as we would love to. But at the same time, we have things like online courses, there's books, there's sometimes shorter workshops. I don't know if you've got any more workshops coming up, Rory, but I know I've got one this Friday and I regularly run them, and I can put my Eventbrite link down below as well. So there's lots of ways to work on all this motivation, inspiration by working with us as well. But even if it's watching YouTube videos and podcasts like this one, it is all a form of coaching. And if the coaching helps you to feel inspired and that helps you to feel motivated, then that is amazing. And that's programs like the cleaning, the people who do all the various types of cleaning and sorting and organizing in the home, inspires people to think, oh, I want my home to look like that, and actually get up and do the housework. So if you're struggling with things like housework, even go and watch something online where somebody's doing it in such an amazing way that it really creates joy in doing it. Because sometimes I actually have to sit and watch somebody else do housework before I can do mine. And it sounds so counterintuitive, but it works. It's in finding that inspiration before the motivation for me. But also, when you get to that point, you can do it without the inspiration. That's commitment, that's dedication. That is a healthy cycle to be going through as well. But yeah, no, thank you ever so much today again, Rory. Incredible conversation today. I've loved this, especially now my voice is 95% back. A little bit better next week.
Brilliant.
So yes, how about we do one next week on self-help books? Because between us and Sue, who's joined as well with more books coming, and somebody I met in Nottingham recently who I spoke to, I did have it there the other day. And I'm just going to say, I have this on my shelf. Somebody who I met recently and had a one-to-one with is actually becoming a client of mine, has a book called Motivation, Motivated, Motivational. And the whole process in this little book, From a Flicker to a Flame, is all, sorry, no, the title's Flicker to a Flame, but it's about going through that process as well. So for me, we could perhaps even do a session all about self-help books in general. We can do some reviews on some, perhaps do some readings out of our own books, and help people connect with the purpose of picking up a book again.
Okay.
I think that'd be a good one. As we are the self-help bookshelf, I think it'd be good to throw one in about books. Yay.
Right.
Yay. Challenge on. Well, thank you ever so much, everybody, for listening in today to the Self-Help Bookshelf's High Leverage Actions podcast, all about finding your higher self, and today's conversation all about motivation and inspiration. See you all next week.
Cheers.
Bye.